All right. Hello, everybody. Happy Tuesday. Happy good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending on what time it is in the world where you are. I hope you're all having a lovely Tuesday. Over here in Montreal, it is finally cold. I am finally feeling like I am coming out of my cocoon, as it were, as a true Canadian through and through. I have no interest in feeling any kind of warmth whatsoever. If my nose isn't running, I'm not happy. That's kind of what if you're Hanny and you're in the audience, if you're my coworker Hanny, you will not be happy to hear that. But alas, this is my show and I make the rules. Canadian flag indeed. I hope you're all having a great day. It's been about 10 days since we launched the revamp of the Studio UI, and I just want to I want to comment on the passage of time, let's say. So I'm going to share my screen and make sure I don't forget this time. But just to comment on the passage of time, I think it's incredible that I'm so used to the way that this looks already, and it hasn't looked this way for very long, and yet look how beautiful it is. So just want to once again shout out the studio team for doing a great job here. Beautiful stuff. We love to see it. Sorry, I'm very distracted by Ikutetsu, the sticker you've posted, this GIF, this like jelly flan thing. Incredible and a little scary, but I think that's right. I think that's good. All right, so let me run us through the kind of trajectory for today's stream. But as usual, off the top, I'm just going to say if you've got questions, leave them in chat. And if those totally derail the thing I had planned for today, then that's totally fine, because that's the way these things are meant to go, really. But what I plan for doing today is I released a video over the weekend about, I'm going to call it email validation, but I know that Patrick is in the audience, and I know he's going to say it's not email validation. But to a non-developer, well, it's not really email validation, but I've seen a lot of questions about checking user input against the contents of a table to make sure that you don't record the same thing twice, let's say. So I'm going to show you how Patrick showed me how to do that. So I'll run you through kind of making the beginning of a bot that captures a user's email and then is able to measure it or reference it against an existing table such that you don't verify the same user twice or capture the same email twice. Now, as I was planning for this live stream, I kind of thought, when I build bots, all of them kind of look the same or they're very similar. The introductory portion, right? And so kind of the place that you drill down is afterwards. And so I kind of thought that I would run you through my process for the beginning of a bot and then leave the rest to your imagination. So like, what do I do at the beginning of a bot conversation such that I know it's going to be useful and then more importantly, scalable later on in the conversation? Because what you don't want to have happen is you spend hours and hours building a bot and you're really proud of it. And then like a month and a half later, you get a new coworker who joins your team and they've got an amazing suggestion, and then all of a sudden you can't actually make any edits to your bot because the way that you built it might have been a little bit brittle or a little too rigid. So anyways, all of that to say, as Patrick says, we're not doing email validation today, but we're doing we're doing something. If you're new here, I drink a lot of coffee, and I drink a lot of coffee on these streams. And the final thing that I'm going to add before I jump into building today, if you're in the audience today or if you're watching this on YouTube later on in the future, Botpress is now on Instagram and TikTok. I really enjoy making short form videos. It turns out that's actually really very enjoyable, and forcing my coworkers to be in them with me is twice as much fun. So if you're interested in that kind of thing and you want kind of a behind the scenes peek at what the Botpress office is like, because it's a lot of fun, do follow us over there or just go take a peek at our profiles. I hope that you won't be disappointed, but I can't make any promises. All right, so welcome to my bot. I'm gonna actually, let me query the audience for a second. What industry should I be making a pretend bot for today? First person to say like a good suggestion. I can't take the first suggestion, but I'm gonna take the first community source suggestion for an example. And I'll let a few of them pour in. I see fitness, I see real estate. Those are classic ones. Oh, these are all really good. I am going to go with dentist for two reasons. One, I have a dentist appointment next week and I can't stop thinking about it. And two, the answer was written in all caps and it made me laugh. but we're going to go with dentist. But I will say like fitness, real estate, hospitality, like these are all very common use cases for a chatbot. So I think that is spot on. All right, so here we go. I'll name this just a welcome node. And so I know that a common practice for a lot of users is to take the user's first message and save it to a variable maybe, and then run it through some kind of like knowledge-based query. I'm not going to say that's wrong, because as I've said before in many streams, there's no wrong way to build your bot. And if that works for you, it works for you. But a lot of the time, the very first node, so the place where you begin a conversation, is usually where you end up making a lot of changes, because maybe your CEO wants you to greet the user in a different way or whatnot. So one thing that I usually like to do in the very first node, even before I start capturing any information like an email or whatever, is I make sure that the first node is flexible enough that I'm able to make changes on the fly. And if that just means something like including just a text card and then moving on to the actual content of the bot later, then so be it. But I do like having this kind of like, I think of it like an insurance policy. So this first node here is usually just a really simple one that if I have to make changes to it on the fly, then I can do that. Okay, so I'm going to say, welcome to... welcome to the tooth booth. Okay. See, this is why I'm not a dentist. Choitra, are you going to share the template at the end? It might not be useful, but I'm totally happy to share the .bpz file totally. So I can just upload that in chat later. No problemo. If you're watching this on YouTube later, I will share this as well on the perhaps the tutorial section on the Discord channel. You need to pitch this chatbot idea to your dentist. So my dentist is a really lovely husband and wife, man and woman couple, pair, and they're really lovely. And they've been cleaning my family's teeth for like 30 years. And I don't really have more to say about that. They're really nice people. I don't know how they would respond to a chatbot, but okay. So welcome to the tooth booth. And so that's the best practice number one is I usually like to leave this kind of insurance policy just to make sure that if I need to add things at the end here, I can do that. Okay. So now I am this dentist, or like perhaps I work in the office of this dentist's clinic, and I want to provide this chatbot on my website. And there are a couple of reasons I might need my user's email. Chief among them is if they're interested, like let's say I'm looking to book new business and I've got some slots open for patients. Maybe I've brought on a new dentist, for instance. What I want to be able to do is build my business that way and have this process be like semi-automated so that I can leave like the person in charge of sales or the person in charge of developing my business. I want them to interface with customers. I don't want them to have to deal with filtering through lead gen tools or whatnot. And so really what I want to do is present them with like a list of emails or maybe even automate the email send process. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. First thing we need to do is have a place where we store these emails. So this, the beauty of what I'm about to show you is that most all of this happens within the chatbot by itself. So you don't have to integrate with other tools if you don't want to, but if you want to, you totally can. And so our goal here with this kind of bot that we're building is that we want to provide you with all the tools you might need within Botpress, but then if there are things that you want to do after, you should be able to plug other things into them as well via integrations. Okay, so I have this table, which I will call emails. I encourage all of you to get into the habit of labeling all of the various facets of your projects. And so I'll say this table stores user emails. Okay, and so of course, then in order to store these emails, I actually need to put them somewhere. So I'm going to create a new column, email, and I'm just going to create a string column. So that's the format in which my emails are stored. Remember that string is text. So what I have over here is a table containing all of the emails that my clinic has access to. And so what I want to have happen is if they're a new user chatting with my bot, I want their email to get stored here. And if they are a returning user, so somebody who's already spoke to my bot before, well, I don't want to capture their email twice because it's going to bloat my table and make it hard to sort through and et cetera, et cetera. So let me show you how to do that. In the meantime, I see a question in chat. Robert, what's your workflow separation thought process? Ooh, I love this question. This is like I don't know if any of you use TikTok, but there's a currently like a trending audio on TikTok about like, ooh, I love this question. And I do love this question. I will say, Shongtan, I have a video on the Botpress YouTube channel about when to use additional workflows. You might find that helpful. There are a couple of examples on our YouTube channel where I actually separate a bot into multiple workflows. But by and large, the idea here is there are two functions. One is to be discrete about which knowledge base you're putting where. So if I want my user to answer from a specific knowledge base, then I want to nest it under different folders and different workflows. And the second is I really want to keep everything organized. I am like so adamant about organizing projects such that they're scalable later on in the future. And so workflows help you achieve this such that you don't have like 150 nodes and you don't know where to edit and you don't know what's going on. That makes it really frustrating to build with. So we encourage you to consider adding additional workflows to your bot. Yeah, using the built-in table as a CRM, for example, without paying for an additional database. That's kind of the goal, right? Is to enable small businesses to have these tools at their fingertips and achieve things that they could do with other CRM tools, but without having to pay for like 5 different services. So your chatbot can do more than just chat, let's say. All right, so here's my table. I'm going to add a record just for the purposes of this demonstration. Again, if you've watched the YouTube video, this example should look pretty familiar, but I'm going to run through it live just because I know some of you like to watch live examples, like me. I love live theater, which is not what this is, but it's kind of the same. All right, so now the next question that we have is, I have that table, and how do I collect the user's response such that I'm going to measure against the context of that table? So here I'm going to rename this node capture email, super simple, and I'm going to ask my user for their email, and I'm going to use the email address card to do that. So I'm going to say, what is your email? Or maybe something nicer, like, can I have your email address? Or maybe even like a tooth-related pun, which I don't know that I can think of off the bat. This would be maybe a great use for the AI task. All right, so can I have your email address? And I'll make sure to store that in a variable called user email. And so maybe I'll just show you, I'll lead perhaps by negative examples. So I'll show you the wrong way to do this. The wrong way, or a way that might trip you up or frustrate you, or the thing that was leading to the question I was receiving a lot anyways, was that if what I wanted to do was just capture this user's email and store it to a table, I would use an insert record card. Actually, maybe I'll show you the wrong way, just so we all are on the same page about the problem here. So the insert record card for the uninitiated is a card that will take whatever information we want, perhaps the email we just captured from our user, and store it in a table of our choice. So right now what it's asking me is, which email do you want to store that answer to, or some piece of information to? So I'm going to store it to this column, the email column in my table. And you can see here this field supports the insertion of variables. So what I need to do is take the variable in which I've stored the user email here and just insert a record into my table. Let's run through this as an example just to show you the thing that I don't want to happen. So if I say hi, I get welcome to the tooth booth, I'll say soup@gmail.com. And of course, the variable's captured. And if we pop over to our table, we see that we have the same email twice. We don't want this. This is not what we want. So if you're a small business and you expect this to be scalable, you can't be filtering through 10 of the same email. That's a gargantuan waste of time. So let's fix this. So we want to keep this insert record card. We still need this. Eventually, we're going to want to insert some record somewhere, but we don't want to do it right now. Let's begin first by asking our bot to look through that table to understand, okay, does this already exist? So first I'll use the find records card. Now, if you're wondering, how do you know which card to use, or how do you know how to design this bot? What do I do here? I think a useful analog for me is to map the task onto what I would expect a human to do. So for example, if I had if all of this was manual, if none of this process was automated, so I had people coming into my clinic and I was asking them for their email address, and then I had to manually check against a database full of emails to see if I already had them, what would I do? So the first thing I would do is ask for the email. The next thing I would do is look through that list. So before we can start adding here, i.e. insert record, we have to look through that list. So in other words, that's find records. This is kind of just like a bot building aside, but often as a non-developer, it helps me immensely to visualize or conceptualize these tasks in my head to map them onto what I would do as a human in this situation. So if it feels too much like it's happening in the abstract, or I don't really have a handle on what's going on, that's usually what I do to kind of ground myself. But anyways, maybe I should just meditate, who knows? Okay, so find records, what I want to happen is I want my bot to look through this table, look through the emails table to find emails equal to this. So the records filter is asking me, what do you want to look for? What is the piece of information that you want to find? So here I'm going to say variable email is equal to, and then I'll include at workflow.user email. So what I'm saying here is the email that they've entered is equal to something that already exists in that column. And then we have to store this result to a variable, so I'll just call this output. Remember, every search has a result, and so the result here is output. Now, what do we do next? Okay, so let's recap where we got to so far. What I'm saying is search through the emails table to find any email equal to what my user submitted. And if there are emails, then store that to the result workflow.output. Now pay attention, if I zoom, can you all, does this help? Can you see this? Is the zooming helping? Because I'm looking at this specific icon here. Nice. Okay, so this specific icon here means that the information is being stored in an array. Now, that just means there's like a list of different items, but of course we can only find perhaps one email, so it doesn't really matter how many we found. We just want to make sure that we've found a result, that this array contains at least one value. So what we've done is we've taken the human language version of this. Did you find an email equal to this, the one that my user has submitted? And we've turned it into programming language. We've said, does this array have a value? Okay, so does this array have a value? I don't know. Let's find out. So next thing is I want two things to happen. One, if the array does have a value, or in other words, if my bot was able to find an existing email already, I want my user to go down one path. So I'll pop an expression card over here. And then, of course, if they don't have another, if my bot wasn't able to find that email in our table, or in other words, the array doesn't have a value, then I'm going to send them down a different path. So let's start with the first one. I'm going to use the AI generate a transition here because I don't know how to program, but I do know how to type things. So I'll say if the variable output contains at least one value in the array, something like this. Now, I don't remember if this is correct, but we are debugging together. Patrick, if you're in the audience, do not tell me what is correct and what is not. But this is what my brain would say. So it's like, if the variable workflow.output has at least one value in the array, we're going to do something over here. And then, of course, this one is just going to be always because they'll end up in that node regardless. All right, so once again, let us recap where we've gotten to. We've welcomed our user to the tooth booth. We've asked them for their email. And then we are searching against that table to make sure that does this email already exist in the table? If it does, send them over here. So I'll say if email exists. And then if it doesn't, send them over here. So if email doesn't exist. No, character limit. Get out of here. All right, so if email doesn't exist. And of course, I'll just send some text message cards to make sure that all of this is already clear. So I'll say, oops, looks like we already have this email on file. Care to share another? Ooh, all right, hang on. Let me finish up this node, and then Chung Tan, I'm going to get to your question because you are very correct. So let me add a text card here, and I'll just say thanks for answering, or thanks for providing your email. All right. So the question here is, in this final case, is the always transition necessary? You can just drag the end of the node to the next node. So if you're a Botpress veteran and you've been here for a very long time, what you might have noticed is that you couldn't always drag this port to another node. This didn't exist previously. But now it does. And this is just a holdover from the old ways. So you are exactly correct. We do not need this transition. We can just delete it here. And this amounts to the same thing. Perhaps finally, just as a final note, in case you were confused by this, Botpress nodes operate top to bottom. So what's going to happen is this card will resolve, or this will execute, this card will execute, so on and so forth, until we reach the bottom of the node, and then we'll go through this port to wherever this ends up. But of course, if my user takes this path and then ends up over here, then these cards will not resolve. So nothing going on over there. Okay. How to transfer existing CRM data to the built-in table, any API provided. Okay, Ikutetsu, you ask another great question. So there are a couple of ways to do this. The first is if your CRM enables you to export stuff as a CSV, which they should, then you can just import CSVs. We've got videos on the Botpress YouTube channel about how to import a CSV into your table, but it's dead simple. You just hit the import CSV button, so I don't think you can go wrong there. So that's if your CRM allows you to export as a CSV. What most people are asking for, though, in addition to that, or on top of that, is the ability to update that record dynamically. So in other words, as your CRM continues to populate, you want to be able to continue having your bot reflect those changes without having to re-upload that CSV every time. That's something we're currently building. So the ability to upload your table information or your knowledge bases dynamically, that's something we're in the process of building because many people, just like you, have asked that very same question. But otherwise, just to get your bot up and running, you can totally import CSV. And currently, only CSV is supported, though, yes. If you have data in a spreadsheet somewhere, you should be able to export it as a CSV. That shouldn't be a problem. Alrighty, so let's test this out just to make sure that everything is working as we expect it to. So I'll say hi. I'm going to put the same email that I already have. And then, of course, it looks like we already have that email on file. Do I care to share another? I don't know. Do I care to share another? Maybe yes, maybe no. Actually, okay, I'm being coy, but for the purpose of this example, I will share another here. Let's do that. So I'm going to pop an email address in here. And this is just a really simple user email capture. So I'm going to change that text message I sent just to include this negative statement. So we already have that email on file. And then over here, this is where I'm going to say care to share another. This time I have to save this value to a different variable. So I'm going to say retry email. The reason for that is I can't have two variables in the same workflow called user email. All right, so now what's going to happen is I want my, just in case they want to submit another email, I'm going to pop that in here. And I'm going to pop an insert record card in just like I did in the previous node. So we have an insert record card. We choose our emails table. We choose at workflow.retry email because that's the new one. And that's what's going to happen over here. Now, of course, what we could do is continue running that check every time. So we could do the find records card, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think that's super necessary. I don't know that I would recommend that. But there are different ways to build this. For instance, you could end the conversation here completely and then force your user to add something or to start the conversation anew. Interesting question. What's the difference between raw input and wait for user input? There's technically no difference between them. Here, I'll demonstrate for you because I think this would be helpful. So wait for user input over here and then raw input over here. In theory, the difference between these is that raw input allows you to ask a question, insert choices, navigate those choices to different paths if you so desire. That's a pretty classic example of the raw input card, whereas the wait for user input card just doesn't allow you to send any message whatsoever. Perhaps a little history lesson here might be helpful. In the past, what we used to do before the wait for user input card existed was that we would send a raw input card with no question inside it. So your bot was kind of just waiting and answering, or waiting for an answer rather. This was maybe, this was like months ago now at this point, but for a while, one of the most asked for features on Botpress was the ability to have your bot just stop and wait and listen for what the user was saying. So we got around that by using the raw input card without sending a message, but that wasn't really ideal. It wasn't what we wanted. So we added a simple card, wait for user input, that just stops your bot and just waits to hear what your user has to say. So functionally, there's not really a difference. It's just that this is a much simpler way to have your bot stop what it's doing. So stop executing all of the cards in that sequence and then wait for your user to say something. So that's the history behind wait for user input. Can we add a timeout to that card? Oh, Narakaru, that's a great question. You can't add a timeout to an individual card, but you can edit your global bot's timeout such that it reflects what you want to happen. So if you pop over here to chatbot settings, so you click the gear, and then you can adjust the inactivity timeout, and that will be reflected in the wait for user input card. Although if there might be a reason that you want to be more granular about the timeout, maybe on a per card or per node basis, I would be interested to hear why that is. All right, so here we have now, so we've collected the email in this case. This is thanks for providing your email. And then this is we still need that email. And then let's make sure that our users, whether they already provided an email or not, end up in the same place. So here, I'll put, just as a placeholder, maybe provided email. And then you'll see both of these nodes will end up in the same place. So let me just zoom out so we can see what's happening here. Our user begins the conversation. Maybe I'll stack this one up here just to increase the legibility of this project. So the user begins the conversation, welcome to the tooth booth. Then we capture their email. If their email has already been provided, we send them up here. If it hasn't been provided, then we send them down here. And then whether or not that's the case, both users end up in this node over here. Now, what is the next thing we want to happen? Sometimes, I'm trying to think, if I owned a dentist clinic, there are, I suppose, two things. You want either information or you want to do something. You want to book an appointment. So maybe I'll just say something like, what would you like to do today? Dum-da-da-dum. Because users often split answers in multiple lines. Okay, so Narukeru, I understand. So what you're asking is not a timeout as in users inactivity, but what you want is capture every message that the user sends in the next 60 seconds. And then like maybe aggregate them together or something. Is that, okay, I see. As Sabrina says, maybe pop that in feature requests, because I think I've seen different versions of this asked. Yeah, it's good to see the why behind a feature request. And equally, I've seen different versions of this same feature request asked a few times. And so if it's coming from a couple of different people and the same feature would solve this problem, then it's a lot easier to prioritize those. But I like this. Okay, how to add a CAPTCHA to a chat to protect against bots. I don't know that this is possible. I don't know if it's possible to add this kind of CAPTCHA protection in your bot, but I wonder. But that's a good question. Thank you, Vlad Dev. I'm actually curious about this one as well. Maybe a question for Patrick indeed. All right, so back to our bot here. They provided their email. I want to ask them what they want to do. And then here, let's just show off the AI transition today and see if we can get this working. So I'm going to save what they want to do to a variable called what do. And of course, we're going to categorize the text what do. We don't have to store this result to a variable. You'll see it's not mandatory here. Let's take a step back. What do we want to happen here? So the AI transition takes what your user has written, automatically classifies or categorizes it, and measures it against some categories that you determine here. So in this case, I'll say something like wants to book an appointment. And then in the next one, I'll say wants to get information. So these are, I encourage you, if you're running a business or if you're maybe thinking about building a chatbot for a business, ask yourself, what are, if I'm spending a lot of time on the phone answering questions, can I what is the lowest common denominator number of questions that I can filter those queries down to? Now, the more categories you add here, the more difficult it's going to be for your bot to analyze these things correctly. So you want to be able to measure the return on investment, let's say, on how granular you want to get here. For instance, instead of wants to get information, I could have put stuff like queries about price, and then what are our certifications, and like what are our store hours. And so these are all different versions of questions, but we can collapse these together under the category of wants to get information, right? And so I strongly encourage all of you, if you're having trouble maybe getting the AI transition to work, or just bot building in general, is to collapse that granularity as much as makes sense for you. It's not always going to make sense, but sometimes it will. And hopefully most cases it will. Okay, so if they want to book an appointment, I'm going to send them down this node. And if they want to get information, I'll send them down this node. So this is going to be called the information node, and this one is going to be called the appointment node. All right, so let us once again recap what happened here. Our user goes through the email step. We capture their email one way or another. Then we ask them, hey, what do you want to do? They type out a natural language message. They're not presented with a button. And whether, based on what they've said, we're able to determine whether they want to book an appointment or get information. And then they get sent down to the relevant node. Let me catch up on chat for a sec. Are there any restrictions when embedding the bot into a Wix Studio website using an iframe? I am not sure. I don't think that there should be any restrictions, no, but I wonder, Arunga, if you have maybe more details about these restrictions or any problems you're running into, let us know. Choitra, I hope that, so that was what the AI transition does. If you still got questions, let me know, but I hope that I answered your question there. I found that renaming choices disconnects the node. Is there any tips on this? Ooh, okay, so do you mean these here? If I get rid of wants to get information. It does disconnect the node. I believe that might be done on purpose because we want to prevent you from changing things and then having that break, I think, but I'm not sure. Let me make sure. But Shengtan, I wonder, if this is a big annoyance for you, we do have a channel called UI Feedback that I read very often, and I'm very curious to know, for our power builders or people that are very often doing repetitive tasks in Botpress, if there are problems that you're running into. I'm really curious about this because we internally have one way of doing things that we think this is actually the better way to do it. But if our users are running into the same problem on the opposite side, I'm actually curious. Sometimes I misspell choices. Yeah, I mean, honestly, typos, same. So if that's a reoccurring problem, we don't love. AI transition does the same as multiple choice. You bring up an interesting point. So the multiple choice card that you're referring to would be something like adding these choices here and then adding some choices like 1 or 2. The difference, Choitra, between the AI transition and the multiple choice is that the multiple choice presents buttons to your user and forces them to choose between them. These types of chatbots have been around for ages. We've made them for ages. Botpress has been around for a bazillion years, or just 7, but quite a long time in the startup world. And so those button-based bots have been around for forever. And those are great, and they serve a purpose if that's the purpose that you're looking for. But as we what did I say this morning? March inexorably on into the future. What users are looking for, what people that build and enable bots are looking for, is the ability to take a user's message that's sent in natural language and then just classify it and then send them to a different path based on it. So eliminate the step where they have to read through the different options and then select a button. So the process here is making that simpler. Behind the scenes, it's using an LLM to classify the user's message and then understand what they're trying to do. But really the end result here, the AI is just an implementation detail, but the end result of what we want is a more conversational or natural interface for your user. The idea here is that button-based bots are good, but it's much more conversational to be like, what do you want to do? I understand what you want to do, and I'll make sure you go down the right path. I hope that answers your question. Yeah, I think JCB is right there. I think that's exactly right. But I am all for being lazy. All right, so let's see what happens here. So once again, we take the users, what they want to do, we classify it based on, what piece of what we think they want to do. Now, in the spirit of this is the Botpress Basics office hours, I'm just going to I'm going to send them a link to a Calendly, and I'll just represent that by saying link to Calendly, or like my booking service. If you're interested in using an API to connect directly to Calendly or whatever booking service you have, there are tutorials on the Discord channel. So on the left-hand side, search for the channel tutorials, and people have spoken about this. But in the interest of the basic stream, I'm just going to assume you can send a user to the link for your booking service. And then finally, information. Here, I'm going to ask my user, here I'll use a raw input card, and I'll just say something like, sure, what would you like to know? And of course, if my user is asking for information, what do I need to do to this node? Enable knowledge answering. So I'm going to do that. And I'll enable knowledge answering, and then of course, it has to pull that information from somewhere, so I'll include a knowledge base as well. So I'll say something like dental office information. And just to test this out, I'll include a text document saying office info, and then I'll say something like, the dentist's name is Dr. Chowder. Because I'm hungry. Why did that sound like a superhero call? Because that's what we are. Every bot builder is a superhero. All right. So this all looks good so far. Let's test this out. Oh, but RTG has something to say. I love RTG's questions because they're always like, I didn't think of that. The challenge I find with AI transition is that it doesn't work well with questions as it does with statements. Ooh, for example, if the user asks, how do I book an appointment? Is that asking for information or wanting to book an appointment? It's a good question. So what I'm going to say is here, what I want to avoid is situations where my user will ask a question altogether. I do not want my user to ask a question. So I was intentional in phrasing the input here. So when I say, what would you like to do today? That's important because sometimes my user will ask a question. They'll say something like, here's what I would like to do. How do I do this? But for the most part, I want to discourage my user from asking a question. I want them to provide a statement. In other words, what you could do is design the conversation in such a way that the user is dissuaded from entering a question. So we might say something like, whoa, hey, where did my text input go? To help me understand, give me a phrase like, I want to eat cheese. The English major in me wants to call this a declarative statement, but I don't think that's very helpful to understand. Super. So super indeed. Every time somebody says the word super, I'm like, am I at work? The other thing to keep in mind when using AI transition is to add a choice for catching things that do not match any of the provided choices. I believe AI transitions always maps to one of the choices. Now, Carey, you bring up a great point. I think we're currently, I don't want to say out to pasture. I don't think that's right. But the jury is out on how we handle things like, was there a positive match here? Does my user not want to do either of these things? And how do we handle that? For example, in the capture cards, we have transitions dedicated to failure specifically. We provide them with cancellation. Do we want to provide the same UX here? This is a feature that's still in development, so I would say, let me know what your preference is, because we're still building this together. We currently don't provide that kind of failure transition for intents, so if that intent doesn't trigger the old school way, it will just keep going down. So the node will continue executing. I don't believe the AI transition does that. And so I'm curious to know, like, what would the best UX here be for you? If any of you are curious, or if you're watching this on YouTube later on, do just send me a DM on Discord. Normally we don't accept DMs, but I'm really curious about this one feature. So if you're like the few people that are watching this, I allow you to send me a DM. Please let me know. But okay, all right, let us test this out without any further ado. So I'll say, hi. I'm going to say stu@gmail.com. This should get added to that database. What would I like to do today? I want to get, or maybe I'll say something like, I need information, please. And then we get sent down this node. So sure, what would I like to know? What is the dentist's name? Let's see if that works. The dentist's name is Dr. Chowder. That's a dentist I would go to. So this is a really simple flow that I think would add value to literally any business that this is added to the website of. The way that I think about this is like, there is no website that's really complete without having a chatbot. So for instance, the way that we build websites today is like, do I have my links to my social channels? Do I have like a homepage, yada, yada, yada. And the way that I see it is like, well, your website just isn't complete without a chatbot because you're missing out on the opportunity to A, generate these kinds of leads, and B, provide this kind of like customer service, let's say. So are there any other features that anybody is curious about adding into here that I could maybe pop in? I mean, I've got a few minutes left, or alternatively, if anybody has questions for the end of the stream, I usually do like a rapid fire question answering period. So speak now or forever hold your bot building peace, as I say. I'm just gonna catch up on chat while y'all are thinking. I do often add, this is Narikeru, I do often add an option to handle cases where the user responds with something that's not an option rather than sending them down the wrong option. Yeah, see, this is, so A, that's brilliant. And B, I don't know if that's from the bot building perspective, what we want you to feel like you have to do. So it might be more helpful to, actually provide like a failure transition or a failure catch or failure handle for the AI transition there. I think that's right. Book an appointment. So I'm going to say booking an appointment is we handle that via an API for like an external service. I'm not going to show you how to do that here because this is the Botpress Basics office hours. So I want to make sure that I keep the stream for beginners, but there are tutorials on that on the left-hand side of the menu on Discord. You can find some tutorials in the tutorials channel. Who would have thought? Alrighty, I'm just gonna go through last week's release notes just to make sure I'm not really missing anything. Bum, ba-da-bum. Okay. This is one thing I need to add because I think this is hilarious, but one of the bugs that we fixed last week was that whenever you were trying to edit a table or a number in a table, the whole thing would crash, which is terrible, but also a little funny. We fixed that. So if you're running into that problem, you should know that it's fixed now. If you're curious about announcements like these, do stay tuned to the announcements channel on Discord. That's where we post our weekly bug fixes and whatnot. You can stay up to date with them there. I'm laughing, but I'm also crying. Global intent listener, AI or OG would be amazing. Yeah, I agree. I think hundreds, if not thousands of other people agree as well. Absolutely, Carolyn, you're spot on there. I think that kind of global setting, I will say as usual, like the trade-off between these kinds of global settings is that if you're building a bot that you want to do a lot of different things, you don't want it going off at the wrong moment. So for instance, I think a really good example of this is the personality agent. Previously, the personality agent was entirely global, so it would manipulate or change or revise or reword all of the messages that you sent or your bot sent. Users didn't want this at a certain point. They wanted like the ability to be more granular about which messages were being rewritten and which not. Because if you're providing something like price or maybe some negative information, you want to be a bit more delicate about handling those things. So that's a situation where actually the global setting was good to a point, and then people wanted a bit more granularity. So perhaps maybe the UX in me is like it's granular by default and then global if you want it to be. And then we're currently trying to figure out how best to build this. But it's a good point. The only thing I would add here is that on another platform that has this feature, false triggers have been a nightmare to deal with. Yeah, Narikeru, that's exactly it. Like, we want to be able to provide you with a global service that isn't going to break your entire bot. But Carolyn, I think you're right. Like global with toggle off on nodes like KB, perhaps. I think that's right. I think that's the direction we're going in, but I can't speak for the product team here. But I do think that like logically you're in the right place. But certainly we're looking at the best way to do this. Why does query knowledge agent card can't handle variables, but it does with, you have discovered something. I believe what you're referring to, Shangtan, is this. So the query can handle workflow variables like this, but it cannot handle them like this. I think that's just a mistake. I don't know. There might be a reason that it's built this way for whatever reason. But you bring up a good point. So I actually wonder, maybe let me do some research on this and get back to you because I'm actually curious about this as well. I have noticed this also. But functionally, if you're watching this and you have no idea what we're talking about, both ways to access variables, both with curly braces or brackets, depending on which side of the Pacific you went to school on, these are equal. So either doing workflow.userEmail or doing @workflow.userEmail. These are functionally the same thing. We just wanted to provide you with maybe one that might be more intuitive depending on what kind of background you have. In any case, the query knowledge base card only works with the query brace, the curly braces. I'm not sure why, but it's a great question. I love this question. I love receiving questions. I love answering questions. I think I was made to exist on a talk show. I think that my MO in life is to perhaps be a late night host or like be a guest on a late night show. I think that's for me. But I've begun to babble, so I wonder if this might be the correct place to end the stream. But I see a couple of people speaking, so I'm going to let y'all type. If you got any more questions, please let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to end the stream in a few minutes and get back to, I see several people typing. This always happens. And I always worry. Will markdowns ever work on capture cards and not just text? Manny, do you mean you want to be able to format capture cards using Markdown? Is that the question here? Yeah. I don't know. The reason that this doesn't work right now is because our capture cards are limited by the channel that they're deployed on. So we want to make sure that they work on all the channels. However, I'm not a developer, so I don't see why Markdown wouldn't work on them. But it's a good question. I cannot say yes or no, but I will say I will find out. You ask a very good question. You ask a good question. All right. On that note, happy bot building, everybody. I hope that you all have a lovely rest of your week. I hope that it is cooling off if that is the place if that is the weather you would like to be. If it's cold where you are and you don't like the cold, I'm very sorry for you. But maybe go to Australia. I don't know. All right. Thanks for joining, everybody. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week. I'll see you next Tuesday, same time, same place. Otherwise, I'll see you on Thursday at Patrick's stream. Bye, everyone. Happy bot building.